Hello and welcome back. In this video I thought I'd take a break from developing Pong and talk a little about what's involved in making your first game. I'm talking about the sort of game that you could put up on Steam. I thought one way I could do this is to give you a rundown of my experience developing Deadstone. It's my first game. It's the one. You can see it here on the screen. To give you a very quick outline of what Deadstone is, it's a top-down shooter with tower defense mechanics. It also has a pretty hefty character development system, with say 4 stats, a number of derived stats, and 70 perks. There's a variety of weapons to choose from. There are 2 game modes. Campaign. It's a 50 mission campaign where you take the role of a character called Blake, who's a private security operative based on a space station orbiting Mars. Blake escapes from a bacterial outbreak on the station. He crash lands beside the colony of Deadstone. It's a mining colony, and he becomes the obvious choice to oversee the defense of the colony. So basically you have to prevent the infected from getting past you. Every time one gets past you, you lose a colonist. You can build defenses, you can place mines, you can upgrade your character, buy new weapons. And there are 2 separate stories for this. I just couldn't settle on a kind of a tone for the story, so I ended up writing both kind of a straight up survival narrative and something that's a little more humorous, or kind of a tongue-in-cheek take on events. What you're seeing here is the second game mode. That's survival. It's kind of a short game mode where you can go in, shoot some enemies, you pick up power-ups. Most of the features that are in the campaign are also available here, and it has its own progression system. So based on your score in this game, you will get extra resources to improve your loadout for the next. There's also local co-op play for 2 players in the game, and so that's a very quick rundown of what the first game was. Now just got into my experience at the time. To be honest, I had very little experience when I started working on Deadstone. I had a conversion degree in computing, which I just finished. That's basically a 1-year course. If you have a degree in something, you can just kind of jump over into a different discipline in a year. So it kind of gives you a quick rundown of the basics. So a third of that was Java programming, and that was pretty useful. With a very good lecturer who give us she gives a good push to learn as much as possible in the fairly short time, and that was very useful. It's a massive help in getting started in game development. And to be honest, if she hadn't pushed us so hard, it would have been much harder to get started. So thanks, Maeve. Before working on Deadstone, I tried to make a XCOM style game in Java, and that basically didn't go so well. I got so far, a lot of the basics down, but there was just too much stuff I didn't know how to do. And after about 5 months, I just had to reluctantly accept that it was too complicated to finish. And it was pretty difficult to do that because 5 months of work it's very, very. I mean, if there was any point that I would have quit, that was probably it. That was probably it so far, anyway. Although I would have learned quite a lot at the time, it was kind of difficult to see that at the time. That it was sort of, it was preparing me for, finishing the next game. It was difficult to see. So if it comes down to recommendations, I have a couple of things that I'd suggest. The first would be to learn relevant skills. Now, there are a variety of disciplines in game development. I think for the most part, unless you're making a very unusual type of game, I think the 2 most relevant will be programming and art. So art could be illustration or modeling, or perhaps both. So I think you really need to start to learn 1 or 2 of those to give yourself a good chance. I have heard of sort of approach of going in, well, I have an idea, or trying to get work as a designer. I don't think that's, I think you might be hampering your chances by taking that approach as opposed to say learning programming or art, because there are going to be programmers and designers who will be able to contribute to design and contribute to one of the major requirements of the game, which is they'll contribute to the programming or to the artistic side of it. So I think you'd be hampering yourself if you were to trying to get into design of games straight away. I think that's something you could perhaps move into later, but it's very hard to design a game if you don't understand how it's programmed. So that's just my take on that. The second recommendation would be you need to be just very, very careful about scope. I think there's a tendency when getting started in game development to try and kind of make your magnum opus straight away, and that's generally not going to be a very good idea. If you have very little experience in developing a game, it's very, very hard to estimate how much work is involved. I think that there may be a tendency, just from seeing kind of posts on forums, I think there's kind of a tendency to underestimate the amount of work involved in a game, and this maybe it could be underestimated by 2, it could be underestimated by a factor of 10, by a factor of 50 even. So you want to be careful that the game that you start isn't going to take you 20 years to finish. So you're much better taking a small project. Try to find something that, maybe take something that is existing and make it new, or to try and come up with something new, to work on a relatively small amount of features but really nail them. I think that's better than just trying to start this monstrosity of a project and just not being able to finish it. You will learn obviously from starting your big project and not finishing it, but I think it's kind of one of those. It could be kind of like a crisis point when you realize that you're not going to be able to finish it, because it's just going to be it may be very difficult to move on after that and just say, right, I'm going to pick up the pieces and start working on something else. So that would be the second recommendation. Just be very, very careful of scope. Deadstone took me somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 hours to get from start to Steam. Now there are reasons why that took so long. I could probably do it now and maybe 1,000 to 2,000 hours, perhaps. Certainly 2,000 hours I could finish it. In the first game, when you're implementing features that you have never you've never implemented before, it takes a long time. There's a lot of learning involved. So you're gonna, instead of developing the game, you're gonna be spending time learning, and that's good and it's necessary, but it is going to vastly increase the duration of development. So the last thing I would just suggest is that when you're making a game, you just need to accept that it's going to take a long time to learn the basics. It's going to the basic skills that you need, and it's going to take a long time to development. So you just need to be kind of patient with it, and you're going to have times where you're stuck for a week, or maybe you're stuck for 2 weeks, and just this one problem, and you can't crack it. The chances are you will crack it, but it's just a matter of sticking with it. So you need to be able to kind of deal with the sort of adversity that comes with something that has a kind of a relatively high learning curve as well. And that's pretty much it for this video. If you have any comments or any questions, feel free to post them below. I'll get back to you, and we'll start developing Pong again in the next video, and I'll see you then.